Why is no one speaking out? If we're seeing these things, and I know people who are, why is no one speaking out about these gross violations? Why are there no whistleblowers? This is the first reason Dane asked me to come and speak, because this is my specialty. Why is no one blowing the whistle on these things? I just showed you all the felonies that the federal government, specifically the central node, the CIA, is committing. Why is no one being held accountable? Why is no one blowing the whistle? There is a perfected, exact, refined process that the shadow government uses to secretly silence and destroy whistleblowers. And it works really well. I'll show you exactly how they do it. How do I know what I'm talking about? Let me just stop here a little bit and say this. I have no ego. I'm married. I tried that. My wife would slap me down. So I put some things in my book, not to make myself look like a tough guy, but to prove who I was. First thing they tried to do is tell me I could never tell anybody I worked for the CIA, till I provided documents where they just couldn't refute that. Then they issued threats about what I could and could not say. So I put some things in my book to prove who I am. And I think that's important because there's a lot of frauds out there and you got to be careful. I was a branch manager in the CIA. I was an internal counterintelligence investigator. I was an internal staff security investigator. I was a polygraph examiner. I engaged and got an award for overseas counterterrorism operations, and I was a program manager in the military-industrial complex for a very large defense contractor. That is my background. So I stood against, I guess for a total of 12 years, I stood against the CIA and against their abuse of secrecy, and we didn't know, Sue and I didn't know if I was going to be taken away any day. I mean, we lived with that, she and I together, for a good 5 years. So I put evidence. I actually filed a Freedom of Information Act request to the CIA requesting my performance evaluations for my time on the director's staff as his agent, for my time as a counterintelligence investigator, and for my time as a counterterrorism center operations officer. So after 6 months of fighting, they're supposed to have it back in 30 days. After 6 months of fighting, I got it back. I got my actual proof of who I was, and I put it in front of the company of shadows. And by the time I got it, there was nothing they could do because they issued it by freedom of information. The reason I did that was to prove who I am, or who I was, or who I'm recovering from. So no one can come and say that he's just blowing smoke. And I did that because I knew that's exactly what they were going to do. Okay, where are the whistleblowers? Remember I mentioned, as we get ready to close, remember I mentioned that the government binds everybody with a secrecy oath, a secrecy agreement. Remember that? I know, because I was one of the guys that executed those on people. In that secrecy agreement, you are bound by ever talking about anything you've ever had access to that's classified, period, anything. You mention that, you leak that, you face administrative action, termination, prison, in some cases even worse. Do you think anybody's going to take that risk? Your average person? No, most don't. Some do. Some go past that. There's a massive complex system of secrecy and concealment. This massive shadow government has got a complex system all arrayed against that one man or woman who has the nerve to come out and expose this dark operation. The whole thing is arrayed against that person. I mentioned when we signed up for the intelligence community with an intelligence job, we waived our right to constitutional trial. We didn't even know it. Nobody knows it. They don't tell us that when we sign up. I know because I tried that personally, and they told me, you got no right to trial. That's how I found that out. You have no right to trial. If you are an employee of the CIA or NSA, you have waived your right to a constitutional jury trial no matter what happens to you. There is a sequential perfected system to silence and destroy whistleblowers. Now remember, Congress issued the 2012 Whistleblower Protection Act. You remember that? We're going to protect whistleblowers. Remember the old Ron Paul thing? Okay, they're doing reform. Watch them. They issued the 2012 Whistleblower Protection Act. We're going to protect these whistleblowers. So you're protected now, so if you see anything illegal, come talk to us. Only problem? If you read down in the 2012 Whistleblower Protection Act, it's out there on the net, it says that any employee that has any access to any government classified information at any level is exempt from this act. That's what it says. It's right in there. So you've got to read down to about the last fourth of the act, and there it is. In other words, you ain't got no protection if you're with the CIA and the NSA. You're essentially toast. And they prosecuted several people. Curacao, they raided William Binney's house, put him at gunpoint, was in the shower. I'll talk about it in a second. And just grossly abused. There was no protection. So Barack Obama in 2014 issued the Whistleblower Enhancement Protection Act because a lot of people staged an outcry over John Kirakow's arrest and other things and said, wait a minute, how can you do this? This is censorship at its worst, government corruption at its worst. So Barack Obama issued the 2014 Whistleblower Enhancement Protection Act. So members of the NSA and CIA are protected now, right? Wrong. What do you think? In the act, it says an employee of an intelligence agency can only report that illegal activity if they're currently occupying that position in that agency at the time. Just think about that for a second. I'm going to report that the CIA just killed 5 people in Afghanistan by assassinating them, shooting them in the head. But I can only report that if I'm sitting under the boss in charge of that operation. What do you think is going to happen to me? It ain't going to work. And that puts the person intentionally under the internal system of personal destruction because they have to be right there where they can get them if they're going to report this stuff. Can you see it? And I'll show you how they do that. Sadly, just in this general context here, the news media is compliant. Probably one of the most heartbreaking things is the news media is compliant with this whole system. Whistleblower goes to the news media. Most of them are going to let the CIA or the NSA know that they did that. So freedom of the press is no longer. If they've got the guts to proceed over the evidence, then they'll just invoke the state secret privilege and shut the case down and seal it forever so not even Congress has access. They have that power to do that. I've seen them do it. This is how they do it. They appoint, and this is the system. I want everybody to see the system. I want the system out there in public. So when they pull this, everybody knows what they're doing, what this complex system is, and they can recognize it when it happens. If someone is inside an agency and they see some really black program happen that is illegal and unconstitutional or human rights violation, I want them to know what they're going to try to do to you if you try to report this. And perhaps there's ways you can somehow constitutionally get that to people who need to know.